Thanks, Rory, and good morning, everyone. It's great to see so many people here on I was going to say a lovely morning, but it's probably a typical Dublin Thursday morning. As Rory said, my name is Simon O'Rafferty. I've met quite a few of you before, but there's obviously some new faces here. Just by way of background, I'm currently a research fellow with the Environmental Protection Agency. But for a few months towards the end of last year, while I wasn't a research fellow with the EPA, I was commissioned to do this piece of work with NESC on the circular economy. I only have roughly about 10 minutes, which is a cruel position to be in when trying to deal with such a complex issue. But I really just thought that the morning session is really about the current context. So I'm just going to give a very brief introduction to the research itself. The study, why it was undertaken, and just some of the themes that kind of came out of the case studies. And I'm going to avoid discussing insights and the tentative recommendations because they will kind of come through the discussions later on today. So really, I suppose the rationale why would we undertake a study like this on the circular economy now? And I suppose, as most of you are already aware, I suppose the circular economy, I suppose it does present, a transformative opportunity to rethink how we produce products and services and our systems of consumption and production. And also, interestingly, from my perspective, I suppose the circular economy presents opportunities for, I know it's a bit of a jargon term, but disruptive innovation. That's innovation in terms of technologies, organisational innovation, but also importantly for me personally, issues around social innovation and behaviour. And some of the evidence coming out of obviously the research here, what's happening in Ireland and seeing what's happening internationally, it's obviously we recognise that the circular economy can help assist Ireland in meeting multiple environmental policy objectives across a range of different areas, from chemicals, waste, and climate change and other issues. But also, it's an important. It can be a stimulus for employment in kind of existing and emergent sectors within Ireland. I suppose another kind of key rationale is where there's kind of quite active work going on at an EU level in terms of the EU Circular Economy package. We're just about 12 months into that process, and I think there's 52 actions, some of which Ireland will need to obviously input into and respond to on different levels. And some of them are obviously related to changes within waste regulations, but other issues around how to support innovation within the circular economy. And I suppose another issue that I put into the report around the kind of a rationale for talking about the circular economy now in Ireland is that I know we're all supposed to be, friendly member states and collaborate and get on together, but we know that other member states have actually, they've hit the ground running over the last number of decades in terms of trying to build the structures and infrastructures they need for the circular economy, and in some respects, other regions are gaining kind of front runner advantage in terms of how to address the circular economy within their regions. And I think obviously some of the discussions last night with the Netherlands, having started some of their work in the early 90s and kind of building some of those foundational infrastructures, that it's a good time to start talking about it in Ireland. Again, I think it's quite important. I know there's been intense discussion over the last sort of 4 or 5 years around the circular economy, but I think it's important to remind people that a lot of the theories, the processes and the practices of the circular economy have been in place for almost half a century, in terms of at least people starting to think about what a circular economy might look like, and then actually through to implementation. So even though it's a fairly current discussion, it's been around for a very long time. And while it's kind of often presented in quite simple terms that we need to shift or transition from a linear to a circular economy, obviously it's much more complex when you look at it in detail. But really, even the circular economy that as presented now is about applying processes and ways of thinking and strategies that have been tried and tested in various locations and various scales already, so we know that they work. But the circular economy, I suppose, is making us think about things a little bit more systematically and how sometimes the strategies might counteract each other and prevent the circular economy actually happening. So also looking at why is there such an intense discussion? There seems to be kind of a mainstreaming of the circular economy within business, within policy, within civil society. And I just kind of picked on just 4 kind of probably obvious but kind of key drivers or key rationales for why this might be happening at the moment. The first, probably most obvious one, is the issue of resource productivity in terms of, and resource efficiency, depending on which way you want to describe it. But we kind of recognise now that the circular economy can be an accelerator of resource productivity. One of the studies cited in the report from the Commission sort of estimated that between 10 and 17% of all material consumption within the EU can be avoided through existing circular economy measures, and obviously that can be accelerated and scaled up depending on the level of ambition. Also, in the last number of years, we're getting to better understand the relationship between materials, material management, and low carbon economies. And again, a number of reports cited within the report looking at regional level and sort of sector level opportunities for bringing about a low carbon society using circular economy measures. An obvious one for from the business community around why looking at the circular economy is the whole issue around cost savings and being smarter with resources, being smarter with the materials that you use, and reducing your overall material cost base. But also on the other side, there's opportunities for new businesses to be developing around byproducts and waste materials that previously may not have been any value attached to, and some of the case studies within the report kind of show that. And an important rationale, which is kind of quite important for me, from my perspective, is the employment potential. So, the circular economy as a driver of innovation, by providing new employment within existing sectors, but as I said, also finding opportunities to create employment in new areas where maybe we hadn't thought about potential for employment before, areas like the sharing economy and other areas such as that. So how do we try to approach this from the Irish perspective? I suppose obviously NESC commissioned the work, and I suppose from my perspective, how I interpreted that as a researcher, I suppose the idea was not to develop an idealised model of what the circular economy would look like in Ireland, but to develop a series of case studies of actual practice that are already happening in Ireland, try to understand how they're working, and then sort of see what insights can we draw from that. So there was a very brief desk study on the circular economy in Ireland in terms of what was already happening, what evidence was available, or what sort of secondary data might be useful to help us understand the circular economy in Ireland. We then developed 10 cross-sectoral case studies that were based on contextual interviews, basically going out and speaking to people where they are, site visits to social enterprises and to companies, and then some email and phone discussions and follow-up discussions to kind of clarify further information. That really happened over a 1-month period last year. There was also lots of what I would call informal conversations with kind of experts within academia and practitioners, and trying to understand what they were doing and what was emerging from their areas of work. We also participated in an EPA workshop that the Environmental Protection Agency led and hosted on mapping the circular economy in Ireland in terms of trying to understand who were all the stakeholders and who's doing what. And then from those kind of insights, basically just obviously develop some case study specific insights, and a few of them are included in the report, but then an elaboration on tentative potential recommendations about what might happen in Ireland and focusing very much on the Irish context and not generalised how to approach a circular economy in any region or country. So again, you all have a copy of the report, and I trust that you've all read it at least twice. So you're kind of aware of some of the content, but I suppose some of the, again, it was written to be, I suppose, as accessible as possible, relatively brief, or as brief as possible. But some of the messages that we were trying to kind of get through in the report is just trying to understand, well, what does circularity look like in the Irish context in terms of material flows and waste and what's happening to those materials. Also using some of the secondary data that's available and evidence around, well, what are businesses already thinking about the circular economy. And I was obviously very fortunate that in June 2016, the European Commission Eurobarometer did quite a large survey of 11,000 European SMEs on what they're doing around the circular economy and what they think about it. And I was able to extract the Irish information and just trying to get a set of sense what businesses are thinking about the circular economy and what they're doing. And again, some of the points I suppose are quite interesting, but obviously there's a predominant focus on waste and addressing waste issues over and above maybe energy and water efficiencies and that kind of stuff, which again is quite interesting. And also trying to understand from their perspective what some of the barriers are. And again, some of these will be very obvious and very well understood, but obviously issues around finance and how access to finance to make investments around addressing the circular economy. I like that the second most dominant issue is don't know. Probably don't know what the circular economy is, so I'm not going to do anything about it. But also just the issue about maybe not really actually understanding what the potential or the potential impacts and having appropriate information on which to make decisions around the circular economy. And again, these are all quite interesting. Another aspect, I suppose, of within the report is kind of, I suppose, introducing this idea. I've been told I have 1 minute, so I'm going to speak incredibly fast. I know, but just I think it's an important point. Is just introducing this notion of the Irish circular economy innovation system, and really it's about, as I said, the circular economy demands that we think a little bit more systematically about what we do and how we approach the circular economy. So with this activity is really trying to map out the organisations, the hard and soft institutions, the policies, the rules and procedures within Ireland that are either supporting or constraining the circular economy. And again, I probably don't need to go through this too much, but just so you know in terms of how we addressed and how we picked the case studies, we obviously looked at the typical business model archetypes around the circular economy and what kind of things they address, what themes, so issues around products, services, supply and value chain, and the whole sharing and social economy and those kind of issues. And we actually, to be honest, when I started, I thought I might have very few case studies to pick from, but very quickly we had about 51 potential case studies of Irish practices that we could look at in terms of the circular economy. In the process of, I suppose, wheeling that down or distilling that down, we started to look at, I suppose, the full life cycle perspective and all the various circular economy strategies that sit across that full life cycle perspective. And so decided to pick case studies that at least represent that spread of potential activities across the circular economy. And again, we've case studies, some based in the East, some based in the Midlands, and some based in the Southwest. And again, just so very quickly, it's important to stress, as I said, that the idea of the report isn't to produce an idealised version of what the circular economy could be like in Ireland, but to look at existing practices and see maybe how do we build on those in the future. But the themes of the case studies were quite broad, and specifically so we'd ask, the case studies would allow us to ask lots of interesting questions. So again, the themes were related to reuse and remanufacturing of electronic and electrical equipment, potential links between the bioeconomy and closed loop recycling of biomaterials or biomass, issues around cultures of repair and reuse at a community level, and issues around behaviour change, the whole issue of upcycling waste into higher value products, specifically within the construction sector, which is obviously a big important sector in Ireland, the whole issue around plastics, which is a big significant part of the European Circular Economy package, in terms of how we look at issues around closed and open loop recycling. The whole issue of collaborative consumption, sharing economy, the issue of design, which everybody says is essential. If we don't design products and services right, we don't get the circular economy. And obviously the social economy, social enterprises, and the powerful role that they're going to play. And the second last one, which is really important for me, was just this idea of how do we finance circular economy innovation, and how do we create startups of the future that have circular economy principles built into their way of doing business from the beginning, rather than politely trying to convince other companies to change their practices. And again, the whole issue of industrial symbiosis. So this morning we have 3 representatives from these case studies. So dealing with the closed loop recycling, biomaterials, cultures of reuse and repair. This is my interpretation of what you do. I'm sorry about that. And plastics, and the whole issue of closed and open loop recycling. So I won't go on too much longer because I'm already over time, so I'll just pass you over to the next speaker, if that's okay.